بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أسعد خلقه وخاتم رسله محمد صلى الله عليه وآله، ورضي الله عن المهاجرين والأنصار ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. ثم أما بعد. We're still with Surah An-Nisa, and there are ayat in Surah An-Nisa that talk about the inheritance that are very important to understand. Islam is accused of not treating men and women equally, and we mentioned that. It's not about equality, it's about rights and responsibilities. But it's also accused that the share of men are always, shares are always bigger than the shares of women, equivalent to them. And that is actually not a true fact. If you study the ayat of the inheritance properly, you realize that the cases in which women inherit more than the equivalent men, mothers and fathers, aunts and uncles, etc. When you talk about women in the sense of boys and girls, when the boys are alone or when the girls are alone, and many other cases, you realize that what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about is only about brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers, even though mothers usually get more than the father. But it doesn't mean that women are higher or better than men when they get more inheritance. And it doesn't mean that men are better or higher than women when they get more inheritance. What is it about? Is about responsibility. How did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this division? يوصيكم الله في أولادكم للذكر مثل حظ الأنثيين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving you a will for your children. If you have children of boys and girls, the boys inherit as twice as the girls. فإن كن نساء فوق اثنتين فلهن ثلث ما ترك. If they are women above two, then they have 2/3, without brothers obviously. وإن كانت واحدة فلها النصف. And if she is one only, then she gets half of her father's inheritance, that is. ولأبويه, and the parents inherit. ولأبويه لكل واحد منهما السدس مما ترك إن لم يكن له ولد. If he has children, then his parents would have each 1/6 of the inheritance. فإن كان له ولد وارثه أبواه فإن لم يكن له ولد. That's if he has children. If he has children, then they take 1/6. If he does not have children, وورثه أبواه, and then parents will inherit, فلأمه الثلث. Then the mother takes 1/3. As I mentioned, usually the father takes less if he doesn't have children. But if he has children, then it's only 1/6. إن كان له ولد فإن لم يكن له ولد وورثه أبواه فلأمه الثلث فإن كان له إخوة فلأمه السدس. And then if he has siblings, then the mother goes from 1/3 to 1/6. من بعد وصية يوصي بها أو دين, after a will or an inheritance or a loan that he owes. And then the ayat goes on. What is the system here? The system here goes by how close the person is to the deceased. And the closer the person is to the deceased, the more the deceased should be spending their money on them in life. And therefore, when they die, they get a higher inheritance because they are spending more on them in life. For example, the mother and the son, he is supposed to be taking care of her while he is alive. So when he dies, she is compensated even more than his father, because her loss is bigger than the father. Again, it's assumed that men are the ones who are going to fight and the ones who are going to govern and the ones who are going to do business. And again, it does not mean that women do not have the right to do that. But this is the real case that Islam deals with, and Islam deals with the reality and humanity as it is until today and from the ancient times. So then the next generation is always getting more than the previous generation. The children have more inheritance than the parents. This is another rule. And also the social system of taking care of your siblings. If you are a brother, your sister is your responsibility. In Islam, this is the system that Islam wants to propagate through the inheritance and through all the rules. There is an objective, an intent for men to take care of women, as I mentioned, husbands to take care of wives, and therefore there are differences in the inheritance because they are supposed to spend on their wives. If they don't, what do we do? Well, we should not break the system, but rather look for inheritance uh, rights, other rights. We should not say that the system is ancient or abrogated or historicist or any of that. This is not Islamic because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made this the system that is correct. But when there is no justice and when there is no balance that we're talking about, and husbands are not taking care of their wives, and brothers are not taking care of their sisters, and sons are not responsible for their mothers and their aunts, and so forth, then we should look into the two things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, wasiyah, which is a will. And yes, you can have a special will if everybody agrees to it. And even if nobody agrees to it, according to some opinions, up to 1/3, a child that you feel needs more in terms of the standard kind of values, and therefore you give them part of that. A younger kid that is not educated yet versus the older siblings who are already educated and working, for example, and therefore you leave something for the scholarship for that child, similar to his brothers and sisters. That would not be unfair. That would be normal. A disabled child, Allah forbid, who needs particular care, a very old mother who needs a particular budget, etc. Part of the wasiyah as well for the man or the woman to give the wasiyah for the husband or the wife to continue in the house if they die as a waqf. They call it al-ruqba or al-uqba. That ruqba is to wait for death. So basically the husband gives a wasiyah that the house is a waqf for his wife. She lives in it until she dies. And after she dies, it is actually divided to the rest of the heirs. Or he gives her the house if he dies as a gift. And then if she dies, then it will be on her heirs, not his heirs. Both are allowed in Islam and both solve a problem in the reality that we have in terms of houses and so on. Oftentimes, children who are not faithful enough, they kick out their mother, unfortunately, or their father in order to take the house and divide the inheritance and all of that. But it is allowed for the wasiyah to protect the other spouse from that in their old time so that they can continue in the house. من بعد وصية يوصي بها أو دين or a loan. The person, if they take a loan, then the loans have to be paid first from the inheritance. Part of that is promises that he would promise someone that would be similar to a loan to pay something for a charity or for building an institution or a waqf or any of that. This is part of the inheritance that we have from the Islamic civilization when it was balanced. You can also balance the responsibilities of brothers and sisters by a special wasiyah for the brothers to take care of their sisters. And if the brothers are not faithful enough and they don't go by the Islamic paradigm and they don't assume responsibility for their sisters, then you put a particular account for the sister or give her a share. But we don't have the shared property kind of concept in Islam. In Islam, mothers, fathers, husbands, wives, brothers, sisters, each have their own financial responsibility and financial accounts and everything. We don't have the shared property unless people share, but we do have to balance responsibilities and rights so that when someone dies, the imbalance doesn't harm anybody. That is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the other ayah, غَيْرَ مُضَارٍ. There is no harm here, and the wills should not be used to harm or to bypass the laws. The law is the law, but in special cases, when you honestly think that this child or these children or the daughters or the aunts or a cousin that you used to take care of requires some of your wealth, then it is recommended that you put that in your will. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guidance and forgiveness. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give victory to the oppressed. قولوا قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.